You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. I'm your host, Samson Ladi Anyanini. And my guest, Abdul Malik Kwekubaku, is editor-in-chief of the New Crusading Guide newspaper. His documents have been here. He's been here and just walked out briefly. Should be back. I'm wondering if he's got documents on sex for grades. Inusa Hussein is MP, Tamale Central, and ranking member, Legal, Constitutional and Parliamentary Affairs of the Parliament of Ghana. Martin Pebu is a lawyer and a rights advocate. And Joseph Dinjok Penka is MP, Timpane, and Deputy Attorney General and Minister for Justice. Gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Newsfile.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Right.
morning.
Okay, so we start with the very provoking story that is dominated the headlines and our minds all week. The BBC did a documentary titled Sex for Grades and spoke about how widespread that was a situation in West Africa's universities. Let's listen to this very briefly and then hear a response from one of those affected in Ghana, as well as a committee chairperson at the University of Ghana who will be looking into the matter. We'll ask the questions whether this chairperson is still fit to chair this committee when the matter comes before it.
She wrote him essays to review, visited his office 3 times, and he gave her good feedback on her academic work.
So the German situation, academic freedom. So Google what we mean by academic freedom in the first place.
Not everything felt normal. Professor Jampo wanted her to wear high heels in his office. And then, one Sunday afternoon, Abigail received a strange phone call from him.
How are you?
Fine, thank you.
He began to tease her and accuse her of always being formal around him.
Formal. You want to talk about work, nothing else. It's sabudenche.
Abigail tried her best not to upset Jampo, who became increasingly personal and said he wanted to come over to her house.
Who is not married and doesn't want a decent lady who is also caring? Who of them want?
She reminded him she was a student and told him she wasn't interested in a relationship.
So right now, that's why I'm not really interested.
But Professor Jampo ignored this.
Oh, prepare your mind because I'll be coming very soon.
Eventually, Abigail managed to persuade him to meet in a public place, a mall, instead of her home, later that evening. We knew we would have to be cautious. Long before Abigail met Professor Jampo, we interviewed a number of his former students who alleged they had been sexually harassed by him. Before Abigail reached the shopping mall, we knew Jampo had already crossed red lines over the phone. But we wanted to be sure of his intentions towards his mentee, our reporter. Abigail showed me footage of their encounter. As soon as Jampo arrived, he insisted on buying her shoes as she had reluctantly agreed to on the phone.
You want to buy something?
I told you right into so let me buy one. One for school, one for
Okay. I don't want inconvenience.
you kissed Valentine before.
Pardon?
You haven't kissed Valentine before.
Have I ever been?
Kissed Valentine.
Well, I think it's a step in the right direction. If you look at my responses to the BBC's allegations and all that, I made mention of the fact that we cannot talk about strengthening or building strong institutions if we don't allow them to work. And I believe that the University of Ghana has got its own credible internal mechanisms that can handle competently some of these issues. And so if the decision is to ask me to step aside while they do investigation, I think I welcome that decision, and I'll submit myself through the investigation processes. So I don't have issues with that. It's a step in the right direction. I will submit myself through the due processes.
If you look at the BBC's own title, they said we're investigating alleged so-called sex for grade. And I'm sure you've seen the video, and you should answer whether it has to do with sex for grade or whatever. It has got nothing to do with a relationship between a lecturer and a student. It has everything to do with a lecturer and a friend. Somebody who was sent to come and trap. In the process of her entrapment, she became a friend, and we had our conversation as friends. And some of the conversations were very informal, but we are all mindful of the fact that it had got nothing to do with my professional relationship with a student and all that. And so if you have looked at the video, it has got nothing to do with somebody having sex and changing. How do you talk about sex for grade between a lecturer and somebody who is not his student? And so it is misleading, but it seems to me that I explained the circumstances to them, and it seems to me that there are people behind the scenes trying to pull the strings just to be able to embarrass me and all that. Because if you speak to the BBC, they tend to understand your point of view. I've written extensively. I'm going to give you copies of these letters. This is my first letter I wrote to them. It's an 11-pager. The second letter, it's here, and then the third letter explaining. And I made a lot of points, raised a lot of issues with what we were seeking to do. But some way, somehow, they decided not to factor anything that I have said in this letter into their own reportage.
What we intend to do is to investigate the matter, follow our processes, and if these gentlemen are found culpable, recommend appropriate sanctions to the Vice Chancellor to apply, because he's a chief disciplinarian. The university will not say that these are cases that don't happen, but you see, you can only investigate when there's proof. And in fact, in our response to the BBC, we asked for the evidence that they have to help us with our own investigations. And initially, now they've said no, and so they want us to properly apply for it if we are going to do. And if they bring it to us, then that's the evidence to proceed on.
What happens to these two professors while investigations go on?
Well, I think the senior management of the university will soon make a decision, and you will know what the decision is. If they are found to be obstructing the processes, then the university will have to take the appropriate measures. But it's not for me to decide. It's for senior management to decide what to do. Ours is to take the evidence we have and to begin our investigations, and in fact we've already started. But I must say that in the cases of sexual harassment, really, usually it's difficult to prove. So it's not as if the university doesn't take these cases seriously. The university takes them very seriously.
So when the person knows that the spotlight is on me for all the negative reasons, they tend to be more cautious. But if you have not reported them, then they go on doing what they want to do, and you are the victim, and you continue being victimized.
Did this particular, it was advertised as sex for grades?
Yeah.
You've watched it. Did you see sex for grades in there?
Well, I think many people have commented on that, but nonetheless, I mean, the simple answer is no, at least not as it involves Ghana. But it doesn't mean that this is not a serious issue to investigate, because our policy has been breached, in the sense that all the definitions of sexual harassment and misconduct, if you are misconducting yourself in a way that is, I mean, it was inappropriate for you to be seeking all the things that we saw in the video. And so the policy itself is breached. And then we also have the code of conduct, okay, or code of ethics of members, senior members of the university, that is also breached. It is, I think, based on those that the university decided to interdict and then to let investigations go on and be sure that we actually investigate something out of this. You cannot take a decisive decision on somebody when you haven't heard them. And so we want to hear them. The documentary is like the first point at which we receive something to work with. The next thing is to invite people who think that they have been victimized in times past or they are currently being victimized to come forward.
So so that's an interesting point. I saw in the cinema, I was asking, what do you mean? What you're saying is that you're going to ask people who may have encountered these two lecturers before or have similar
others, or any others,
to come forward.
Come forward. Come forward. Because we really want a congenial atmosphere where learning can take place, where teaching can take place without intimidation.
I fully endorse the University of Ghana action. It is beyond education. It is in employment, in HR. It's all over the place, in every sector of the economy, not just education. We should look at the issue of integrity, national integrity. In the area of education, it's all the more important because the education sector is the area where you least expect one type of corruption or the other. And when it comes to promiscuity, particularly a sector where you have considerable involvement of churches. It is a sector that should be considered particularly sensitive when it comes to morality issues.
Right, and that was Professor Yanka. Now, start with my guest, and the BBC story actually, like a similar one I referred to 2017 by the Guardian newspaper that did a survey of about 120 universities in the United Kingdom, and also through the Right to Information Act, got information from the universities about reports of sexual harassment. Was clear that there was evidence of sexual harassment in a situation they called endemic proportions. The BBC's story said academic institutions in West Africa have increasingly been facing allegations of sexual harassment by lecturers. This type of abuse is said to be endemic, but it's almost never proven. After gathering dozens of testimonies, BBC Africa Eye sent undercover journalists posing as students inside the University of Lagos and the University of Ghana. The female reporters were sexually harassed, propositioned, and put under pressure by senior lecturers at the institutions, all the while wearing secret cameras. Okay, so my first, which appears to be the very obvious thing to commence this discussion with, is, Martin, you have watched this documentary. I suppose all of you have done so. It commences with a warning to you who is watching. It was a warning to you watching about disturbing footage of sexual nature. Did you find that warning necessary or any evidence of it?
Well, Sam, to be straight, not in what I saw. Not in what I saw. I didn't see sex, okay? But to the extent that, you know, some people are very sensitive, maybe it's justified. Because, you know, when this matter came up, then it reminded me about an incident that took place about 12 years ago. A lawyer told a lady that, oh, I like your curves. And instantly, the lady was offended, okay? So that tells you that we are not the same. So to that extent, yes, it may be put in there because people have different level of resistance to, you know, offensive material. Okay. Like in law, we say the thin skull cases. So some people have thin skulls. So you have to put in a disclaimer to avoid any problems.
We'll get into the issue. Now, Yusuf Saini, did you find any evidence in the documentary manifesting, justifying the title, Sex for Grades?
No, there was no such evidence. I mean, but I understand that such evidence could not be on tape because that would have straight into the realm of pornography. BBC would have been engaged in shooting a pornography.
You mean you couldn't have evidence of a lecturer
having
tampering with grades.
No, having
fixing
sexual
grades
intercourse
after having you know gotten sex.
No, having sexual intercourse with clear evidence that that intercourse was intended to influence him in awarding grace to the lady who was the
You couldn't have
matter.
that on the tape.
You couldn't have that.
Could you
that
have
would
had
been pornography.
evidence of the lecturers tampering with grades?
Well, you can't have that evidence. How do lecturers tamper with grades? I mean, lecturers, how would they tamper with grades? They can only tamper with grades when there's a cause and an effect. Okay, you have to link the two.
Explain that.
That is, you see a lecturer propositioning a lady to temper or award grades, and then there's a correlative evidence of the lecturer doing that. Because every now and then lecturers mark and remark papers, and so and adjust remarks actually when their students do not perform very well. That cannot be said to be tempering of the results.
Okay.
So you could not have expected. I did not expect when I saw the title "Sex for Grades." I did not expect to see any sex in the video. I did not.
But you were warned.
Actual sex.
I was warned.
You were warned.
I was warned because
that what you're going to watch has disturbing footage of sexual nature.
Yes, because you know it had disturbing footage
of sexual nature, not sex.
Not sex.
Okay.
Because you see some of the side
guy,
the side chick guy or the side guy, you know, that was offensive.
Right.
Okay, and emotionally distressing. I mean, if you were a parent and then you are put in the position of somebody having to watch the daughter being suggested to, that could be very distressing emotionally. Okay. And that's why you were warned.
All right. So, Pranka, I don't know, do you agree somewhat with Inusa that the title, the documentary's, content did not confirm the title, strictly speaking?
That would be if the investigators tell us that all that we have seen is everything that they did. I think we are proceeding on that basis. Otherwise, it's possible that they are keeping something from us. That's possible. We have not been told whether the footage we have watched is everything that they did, or there are other things to it than that, such that maybe before a committee, they will have to now play that to authenticate whatever they have said. But taking what has been put out there, literally, and without additions or subtractions, you may not be able to come to that definitive conclusion that sex for grades.
Will your suggestions or position change if you were told the caption was only generic to represent harassment, the power imbalance, abuse and misuse of trust, power, positioned by lecturers in institutions that are supposed to act like in loco parentis for the students?
Yes, my position would have changed. I agree with that. You see, and that's why I would say that I will agree to the extent that what they said was metaphorical.
Okay.
You know, I will agree to that extent.
All right.
However, let me say that if you take the raw footage as we have viewed, and you take the literal meaning of what has been given, there is a little misleading. You know, if you take the literal meaning. But if you go into metaphor, or as I have said, they may have been privy to something that is not out there, then we can still come to that conclusion. And you have rightly pointed out that, you see, they were seeking to establish a point that in the various universities, when they were going out there to start all this project, what they were seeking to establish was that in the various universities, sexual harassment goes on, and that on the basis of that sexual harassment, it results in maybe changes, people getting grades that they do not deserve. That is the basis upon which they set out to establish this. And you may agree with them to that extent, that yes, it was metaphorical, we should not just take it literally. And you know, we as lawyers, we've now gone beyond literal to purpose and all that.
I know. So we'll get into the details.
Very well.
But let me get to Kuku. And the question is the entrapment method? Professor Jampo says this was clear entrapment, and there are people who say they have some ideas about the particular lady, but it doesn't matter which lady it is. This is a difficult thing, you know, for some men to avoid. Is the entrapment method, or rather hard evidence of actual sex and actual grade fixing, what is required to come to the conclusions that have provoked this discussion?
Well, you know, I've had a difficulty with this whole thing about entrapment and all those things. This is not the first time we are going to look at that methodology. In any case, it is as old as undercover journalism. From the 1880s, go to read the literature. It's always been there. And there's always going to be a certain ethical challenge or dilemma relative to that. So I admit that. I have no problem with those who believe it is not a good method and want to criticize it and things. They are entitled to that. But I've always said something. Look, the cure for this so-called entrapment is integrity. Integrity is your ammo, your arsenal against this so-called entrapment. And usually, undercover journalists, when they want to do these things, it's not just a flight of imagination. It is because they hear things and fingers and voices are pointed in certain directions. There's always that base from which they proceed. And I've been listening to all the discussions going on. Everybody, but this phenomenon is not new. This phenomenon is out there. We've all been talking about it and all that. Perhaps we've not come forward anything of evidential value to pinpoint in specific directions. But we all see it's there. So if it's there, then lower the entrapment chorus.
I've been told stories by ladies, and I have no reason to doubt them.
Yes,
it happens.
Yes. Look, just a bit of a digression. This judges thing, Tiger Eye did.
Correct.
All over. We all knew it for years.
And it's not stopped, really.
Yes, and even Chief Justice, over the years, different Chief Justice had publicly spoken against such things.
You know, I'm serious. When I say it's not stopped, you go to the court, the court area. No, you wait. You get to the court area, and these clerks, and they are still the bailiffs who are paid to go and set things. They will never do it unless you part with some 10 CD here and there. And the Chief Justice just gave a warning recently that the judges must stop giving whatever allowance kind of tips to the people who are paid to serve them.
Exactly.
Okay, could continue.
Yeah. So that is the environment within which operatives, undercover journalists or private detectives or whatever will proceed. Beyond that, of course, you have to then subject the thing to a certain forensic analysis in terms of factual thing. I'm talking of if a project is
so
put
as we
out
begin
there.
to get into the detail, Koku, tell me this. I'll come to Martin. So this is the story we have heard from those who have produced the documentary. In the same light, we ought to be taking the other narrative from those who are involved, at least those who have come forward to speak. Until we go through a certain due process to sieve and verify the information to determine who is telling the truth and who is lying. We should use both.
Exactly.
Professor Jampo says this Abigail lady he was told had been to his office like 20 times looking for him, and that she had made things that appeared, you know, giving a man a bit of a difficulty. So, will you still say the entrapment method is good for such uncovering such evidence?
You see, I'm so challenged because I don't want a situation where as if I'm looking at this specific project, and in view of the fact that it's going to be investigated, and Jampo and the rest will appear before the committee. So I have a certain difficulty. I don't know, others may not have, that I want to look at a general picture and not the specific in terms of this.
No, but just a bit about this specific. That is it fair for, if that is true, is it fair for that person to turn around to play victim? And is it fair to blame the person who has had, you know, these visits upon visits and phone calls and conversations that, you know, have gone into a certain level,
see,
to blame as having done something wrong?
I might sound hypocritical. Me sitting here, I'm not sure if I would have been able to beat that trap. I'm not sure if I might succeed in beating that kind of trap. The animal in me might come out to the fore, and not me, but the animal. That's the problem we all have. And that's what I mean by a certain integrity. When you are in a certain situation, you are a lecturer at a university, you see that environment, and somebody is coming to you. In this case, wasn't his student as such, but it's still to do with some mentorship. The person is seeking some inspiration or some support and things from you. You see, I'm being hypocritical. Ask me whether I have not done something that could easily have put me in trouble. But you've invited us to discuss such a matter. It's a very uncomfortable subject for me. Okay, but whilst I do not want to judge the individual Professor Jampo, I'm seeing that these things perhaps are lessons that we should reinforce our moral armory in such situations, so as to be able to avoid it. Look, it's not easy. It's easier saying it. Okay, here we are. We're going to sit here and pontificate and say all sorts of things, very beautiful things. But wait till one of us is caught in that situation. When you have this beautiful daughter of Eve coming and saying, oh, look, you can slip. I'm being honest with you. You can slip. And so it's so difficult. I didn't want to discuss this subject matter. I'm being honest with you. Yesterday, I called the producer and told him that he should get the experts.
It looks like, and to talk about calling experts and women, it must be stated that I have been told by production that they actually assembled some women. Apparently, some of them at some late hour withdrew, and some of them were simply unavailable. I think we may throw a challenge. Those of them we know who have some expertise and have some encounter with students in this area and have very strong views about this matter. Let me place a call to our production and we can have them.
If I may summarize,
no, but I want to ask this small thing before you summarize. It sounds like there's a nurse in there. Did he work with this team?
No, there's no nurse in there, because it isn't as if an opportunity didn't exist for an nurse to be in there. But a nurse declined to be part of this particular project because he's doing so many other things. And I did not want an nurse there. BBC are capable. They have, in fact, if it comes to infrastructure, logistica, and all those things, they have more than Tiger Eye. Especially the Africa Eye, BBC Africa Eye. They work with Tiger Eye. Let's not deny that. Yes, number 12. Yeah, they work with Africa, and they still do so many things. So there's a close relationship between Tiger Eye and BBC Africa.
Okay, now proceed to your summary.
See, all this argument about the title, if I didn't know that whilst that was the title, but they indicated in terms of the correspondence to the targets, that beyond this title, this title is just a general theme.
That's right.
We are looking at to investigate the issues of sexual harassment among lecturers and to investigate the issues of sexual abuse by university lecturers. So they had subsidiaries within the genre. So for me, I think the argument about sex for grades and this is a wrong title, I didn't see that. It's actually of no moment to me. Let's go do a content analysis of the things. And to be honest with you, it's the committee. This whole thing is at the committee level. And it's not restricted to Legon. its impact, the reports that will come out of this process may help create a culture of deterrence to all those animals out there, especially the men. But women too are part of it, but especially the men.
Okay.
We are prone to creating such problems more than the women. Okay? So to be honest, perhaps it will be some education through negative experience for all of us.
The Nigerian professors, we understand one has been dismissed. One was suspended first by his church because he's a pastor in a church, and then subsequently also interdicted by his university. And then a day or two after, University of Ghana also took a similar situation, interdicting the two professors. Well, as long as you can hear from Professor Jampo, he says that's a fair process. He is willing to go through the investigations that will go on. But Martin,
yes, sir.
Would you say, and we are sort of bringing a bit of a focus to the actual documentary, to the Ghanaian situation as regards the two, professors who are involved. Would you say Professor Jampo's situation is different from the others? Will it be a fair outcome if Professor Jampo is adjudged guilty? That first, this is not his student, seem not to come from even the university, and then he says there was some friendship.
Yeah, something. This one here. This is very difficult.
A quick one. It might sound potentially prejudicial, but perhaps I need to input that relative to the due process that the committee will be going through. If BBC, and I'm told they have agreed to cooperate, apparently have extra material. They're talking about some 12 audiovisual things that they will bring to bear on the thing. So if we're looking at just this recording or audio that has been shown,
we'll limit ourselves to what we know now and keep the discussions on what we
know. Because of the question you raised.
That's exactly what I'm doing. So on the basis of what you have seen, Martin, don't let anybody preempt you. On the basis of what you have seen.
That's a good one.
Is his situation different from the others? In the case of the others, we knew they are their students.
Yes.
We knew one of them, the pastor, the lady was seeking admission. And then in the case of Professor Jampo, we know it's not his students.
Wow. Sam, I think to be very fair, the honest truth is that whichever way I look at it, to give a very fair answer, it will be a bit prejudicial to the investigations. Yeah.
The investigations is not a court. Even matters in court, which are of public interest. We have discussed them here.
Very, very honest. And most especially, see, maybe I should even disclose my affiliation. I play football with Professor Jampo every Sunday evening on Legon campus. We have a work fit club, that's his name. So maybe there's even unconscious bias. So it's good that I even state this. So to be very, very candid, you know how to do it. If I want to speak honestly, it will be prejudicial because, so I think the best we should do is that maybe let's discuss the general policy, the general sexual harassment policy, and look at
we could deal with the specifics to start, and then we get into the general and the questions of codes of discipline and how they ought to be implemented in these universities, what the university should be doing to protect the girls, from the predators, and the role that the girls themselves ought to play. The questioning that Inusa raised about some girls also being, guilty of getting into some of these things. We are told about some lady who wrote an exam, didn't write anything on the paper. All she did was put her naked picture and telephone number.
You sure?
Yeah, suggestive.
Wow.
So back to that question.
Yeah. You see, and then, okay, so let's say this, like we usually say, a man is innocent until proven guilty, okay? Yes, so to that extent, from what I'm seeing, I'm not going to pronounce him guilty because it's not been proven yet. And most especially, you've heard that there's a lot of raw footage, a lot of it. So that's going to provide the context.
The chairperson of the Legon Anti-Sexual Harassment Committee is categorical that their policy has been breached.
I understand. When I look at the policy, I see where she's coming from. So that basically there's this wide general statement that, look, as soon as they find that there is power imbalance between the two persons, they are veering towards a breach.
The Jampo situation, that's not his student.
Sam, that's why I said that one, please. I think, as I've mentioned, somebody. So in other words, to summarize it, this is a friend.
She's actually not a student.
But was made to look like a student, you see. So that's what makes it complex. So I think that to that extent, maybe let me reserve judgment on it. It's quite...
When she approached Jampo, she didn't say, I am your student. She was seeking further help because Jampo has an area that she's aware Jampo has expertise in. That's why it was a talk about further studies and the rest. Still, you want to recuse yourself because of your...
Of course, so from what you are narrating, that will go for him as showing innocence. Okay. But as I've said, because we haven't heard the other side, and also because of the fact that we'll be seen to be conducting a media trial. So maybe if we did the general, we'll be safe. At least he's put out a robust defense out there. Yeah, you know, he's not media shy. He's put out a very robust defense. And I expect that in the same way, he will appear before the committee and do the same. And of course, BBC will also come with their footage. And then we'll see how it pans out.
The committee chairperson, will she be able to sit on this process? She says their policy has been breached. She's clear about that.
Okay, so I think to the extent that the general public is asking for her to recuse herself, it's fair. There are other persons, so it's fair for her to recuse herself. Yes, that will be
if
better.
She doesn't?
Oh, looking at it, I'm expecting that she will, because the general public, to have said that she hasn't seen a breach and all that. You know, this is the same, what do you call it, same professor who is sat on the committee, and they've dismissed other lecturers. You know, she said in the past 2 to 3 years, they've dismissed about 3 lecturers, right? Yeah, so she's been on the committee, and she's been able to do a good job. Yet this one, if these are her preliminary remarks, personally, I do not think that she necessarily has prejudiced the matter, but because of the general statement that justice not only ought to be done, but ought to be manifestly seen to be done. So because of that statement, I think Dr. Amwakwehini should recuse.
Okay. Do you want to take it from that point, Kwenka?
You know, something, first let me state that what we are discussing and the terms of reference of that committee is not a criminal inquisition. That's not it at all. And so we have to distinguish that from a civil inquisition as to whether or not systemic procedures have been breached, whether codes of ethics have been breached and all that. It is not a criminal trial. So we have to take it off from this. Unless you can establish crime, which will go beyond the university at that stage. Because the university does not have power to try criminal matters of that nature. They can only look at the civil wrongs and the codes that have actually been breached. But you see, something, my brother tried to stay away from something for fear of prejudice and etc. He may be right to some extent. But this is the position. You realize that the one who has actually been in this situation, Prof, has virtually acquitted and discharged himself of any wrongdoing. I mean, so it does not also prevent us from running some commentary on the matter. Because he says that based on what has been presented, I think that no offense has been committed. It's his past judgment. And then the chairperson also says our code have been breached.
In fact, all of you coming here this morning knew that you were going to discuss this.
Absolutely.
And so please proceed and discuss.
That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing.
And we're expecting to see the women.
So what I'm saying is that, you see, in every case, you listen to both sides, isn't it? As lawyers, that's what we've been trained to do. You listen to both sides. You make your case, the other person will make the, and then an independent arbiter will be able to come to a certain determinative conclusion that this is the way to go. And this is the matter that we're actually discussing. And having reviewed the footage, as I have said, and the university's code of ethics, as stated, I listened carefully to Ank Kwekubako when he was making his submission. And he made a very, very wonderful submission. He's saying that that title, below it and beneath it, you had other subheadings
right.
as to what exactly they were looking for. So not necessarily just sex in return for grades, but how people in the position of trust, such as lecturers, use those positions in a manner as to destroy the moral fiber of our society. I think they also sought to establish that. You know, and that's why Uncle Kweku was running away from it. He said he's incompetent to comment into detail on those matters. But the university's code of ethics, where provisions are made, you know, our constitution is very clear that you cannot punish a person for an offense that is not written and a punishment prescribed for it. The constitution is very clear on that. But if the code stipulates that any conduct such as that of, for example, okay, is contrary to same, then it means that certain penal consequences ought to be exacted if it is established. So at this particular stage, I will say that the code versus the conduct is what is going to play out. Because the committee then is going to read out the code and then say that, look, by this conduct of yours, you've breached this or that or that. And remember that even after the committee has sat, if they engage in any act that he finds that is unlawful, they can go for a certiorari to quash the whole thing. The decision that will be arrived at. They can go for that. For example, if they raise the issue of the fact that she has already prejudiced the outcome of the case, and then they ask that she should recuse herself and she does not, it will be recorded. When it goes before a court, they will make an inquiry whether or not that conduct by the chairperson before the sitting amounted to prejudging whatever she was going to listen to. And of course, you know that when such a thing arises, the courts will not hesitate at all in striking it down. So it's preliminary, but I think that even the university, their own lawyers will sit with the chairperson, and then they will have discussions, and whether it is not going to be in her interest and in the interest of the university. Because, look, you know very well as lawyers that when you go to the higher court, they are not going to look at whether or not the person did what he's alleged to have done. They are going to look at procedure at that stage. And if you were supposed to recuse yourself that you did not, then they'll strike it down. And then that will be the stage where sometimes you have the public crying out loud that the person committed this thing. Everybody saw it. How come the person is walking around? You know, but they do not know that everything operates within the realm of rules and regulations. So, for me, without passing any judgment, and I don't intend to do any such at all, it's going to be a very interesting one ahead. Because as they have, Uncle Kweku indicated, other footages will be brought. Prof will be given the right to defend himself. And then he raises the appropriate defenses. If they don't find any merit in it, they apply the appropriate sanctions. And I mean, they will say that, look, you breach section A or B or C. What
we are reliably informed here on Newsfile that Professor Margaret Amoako-Hene will not chair the hearings, and that a subcommittee has been set up to deal with this specific matter, and it will be chaired by a retired justice of the Superior Court of Ghana. Is that good news?
Well, why is it consequent upon the pronouncement made by Amoako-Hene? Or is just part of the administrative procedure in the university? I mean, first of all, let's get things straight. Dr. Amoako-Hene's statement is based on a prima facie breach of the rules of the university. And that leads the university to conclude that prima facie, the rules of engagement of the university, sexual harassment, the policy on sexual harassment and misconduct has been breached. And that's what led.
Prima facie means
on the face
of the evidence they have seen, there appears to be a wrong, needing further investigations.
And that's why they've taken that action. And so, until we know the reason, probably they believe that this matter is of so much, I mean, so grave a nature that they want the decision of the committee to be, I mean, foolproof. And probably that's why they are going for a retired justice.
Taking the turn of events with the VC's accuser. You know, there was also that aspect.
Yes. That was quite
VC's accuser, and I put accuser in quotation marks. What do you make? What do you make of the general claims in the documentary that they spoke to many students or former students of these lecturers who accused them of sex for grades without proof or verification of these allegations.
Exactly. That is how I saw the intervention of my good brother, Kekubaku. And in matters of underground coverage or reportage, the people would have chosen their victims already. Okay? There have been overwhelming evidence that calls for now some pictorial evidence, some hardcore evidence to be able to link what they have been hearing with what they think is happening at an institution or a place of work.
So at the hearings, disciplinary process, it is your expectation that they will provide even more
evidence.
Okay.
Even more evidence. I mean, they didn't just, the University of Ghana has a lot of lecturers. Okay, they didn't just settle on Professor Jampo, and we don't want to put Professor Jampo on the spotlight.
Exactly.
But everybody must understand that they had the reason, the basis for choosing Professor Jampo. That basis might be.
There are two of them affected, not him alone.
Not him alone. Yeah. That basis might be proven in an investigation or debunked. But the fact is that they had reason to believe that what they were hearing about those lecturers, the two lecturers, needed further investigation. Now, they chose the unconventional approach, probably because the students, because of the power relations between the students and the lecturers, that it was going to be exceedingly difficult to get students to come out and testify against their lecturers.
Of course.
That's why they chose the unconventional method of taking somebody from outside the university. What did they want to demonstrate? They wanted to demonstrate that when lecturers come in close proximity to their students, misconduct, of inappropriate conduct occurs. Okay, that lecturers exploit the power relationship between them and their students and engage in misconduct. Okay, and that was the essence of the video. We should look at it, and whether you look at the video from the point of view of the fact that sex did not occur, or that the principal agent here, Kiki Modi, was not a student. Look at the context of the video. Was she propositioned?
You referred first to the Dr. Paul Pame Batako.
Batako?
Yeah. You referred to his. He said, "I want to be your side guy." You know? And you say, parents will look at that and feel very distressed.
Very distressed.
Okay.
And you don't need further evidence to link what he meant by side guy to what was going to eventually happen. And this was a lecturer. And it is true, my brother, that this matter is just like corruption. It's just like corruption. It's a moral decadence in society that somehow the victims are so powerless that they might be unwilling to own up, to come out. It takes some confidence. 2 days ago, I was reading about Dr. Elizabeth Ohini.
Yeah.
That she had the courage to tell her story 50-something years after it occurred. And that it was only when she told her story that another woman of prominent status in society called her and wept on the phone. That woman had lived with her story all this while, could not even tell it to her children.
So is it the lecturers, the university, or the victims that must take the bigger part of the blame here? When you look at the sexual harassment at epidemic levels in the UK universities, the survey that was done, almost 300 claims were made against either lecturer students or student or even staff among the staff.
Yes.
And the story is told that in some of the situations, the university's decision was to pay out in settlement so that the matter doesn't go out because their reputation was at stake.
That is the reputational damage to the university compromises the ability of the university to exact punishment and even make the punishment public. It was only 2 days ago that we heard that 3 universities had been sacked.
Three lecturers.
Three lecturers had been sacked. So why did they feel refuse or neglect to let the public know that these matters, these actions had been taken against lecturers? Because of the reputational damage that we done to the university. So the university authorities are also complicit.
But you hear them from Legon, from KNUST, from University of Education,
wherever there is tertiary education,
from Cape Coast.
Even
those in charge of these committees are saying that the victims are simply reluctant to report.
Because the victims are powerless. Yeah, you have to understand the power imbalance.
But Honorable, not only that, look, research has shown that sexual offenses, even in the UK, they say only about 20% of rapes and 18% of all sexual victimizations are reported. So why? It's a general trend.
No, it's not a general trend. Stigma.
Because of stigma.
Because of stigma.
Exactly. So it's
and the stigma in the university is huge. You know, somebody. I mean, in the matters that have come out, I've read one lady who said that her parents said they didn't want. She wanted to report, and they didn't want her to be the reason why the lecturer will be sacked.
Yes.
Okay. They didn't want to bear the moral scar.
Yes. So that underscores the point that it's not only power imbalance.
And also out of the fear that once one lecturer is punished, there may be other lecturer friends of that lecturer who may punish you, the student.
Okay. So you must look at it holistically. And I agree with you. Sexual crimes don't get reported because of the stigma.
Okay.
In the United Kingdom, they know their rights. But in this case, power imbalance is so huge.
Yeah. In fact, in the one I'm referring to, a staff who alleged that she had been harassed made a complaint, and she wanted it to be treated informally. When the university's decision was that we'll treat it as a formal complaint, she was unhappy about that.
Yeah. You are a lawyer. Marital cases. Why do you think that we go to the chambers to hear it? People are lawfully married. They want to separate. But matters of the pillow are not discussed in open court. Why do we go to chambers? Because of the stigma. Because what will come out will be so embarrassing. Even you, the complainant, now becomes a victim by the way you were treated. It's so complex. That is why I agree with my brother. The integrity of a person, it is not impossible for lecturers to always be in parentis locus with the students.
To give my brother some information, if you look at social media in the last 3 days, people have come out to give their stories, but they are unable to give their real names. They've asked that they don't want their real identity to be known.
That is the stigma.
They state their stories, but they are
Can you imagine what will happen if you are married? Can you imagine how your husband will begin to look at you?
Be done about that, because that is also helping the situation fester. It's like corruption. If we don't expose it, it will continue to be there. It thrives in that.
That's the truth. But you see, society too, stigma. You know, even let's look at even our laws. You realize that, for example, when a child commits certain offenses, you don't disclose the identity of the child at a certain age and all that. All that are for a purpose.
Yes.
You know, that to be able to protect the person as the person grows. You can imagine that a 12-year-old girl is brutally raped, defiled.
Yes.
You know, and then you disclose the name.
No.
That will live with the girl forever, and the whole world will know that this is the lady. Anytime she's walking out there. So mostly we try to balance all these things. You balance this moral upbringing against the fact that society itself frowns upon certain things.
So it's not exactly the universities which are supposed to be acting in local parentis for these students that is failing. And when we say when we say universities act in local parentis, it means the parents are giving them to be the guardians of the students. So when you take your child to the not child really.
No,
Yeah.
Take
something
your-
else.
They are supposed to act as the
point.
parents in the
I wanted
university.
to make
Are
that
they
small
discharging that duty appropriately?
No, that's why I wanted to make this point. You see, again, let me take us back to social media. If you've read a lot of the stories, in the last few days, a lot of people have come out to state their stories.
Right.
Yeah. Even some of the lecturers we are discussing now, some people have had personal issues. They've started coming out to say that, yes, they've been they've had this problem over the period with this person or that person. I'm not able to mention specific names for obvious reasons. But people have started coming out.
Yeah.
What it tells you is that this was just a spark.
Including
that will let us
lawyers.
increase the intensity of the debate as to what we could actually do to curb it going forward. But Kweku has said it all. It boils down to one thing: whether or not the person in that position and responsibility will hold that integrity. That is the foundation of everything. You see, you could talk about anything, but something, these things that we are discussing now is because of the BBC reportage. But aren't we aware? Yeah. Before this time, aren't we aware that these things are going on? Yeah. We've all attended the same universities. You know, and I don't want us to go into the nitty-gritties and things that happened during our time and all that. That's not what we are we shouldn't. But now that this issue, it is for us to go to the debate to find out measures to curb it going forward. But again, I have listened carefully to social commentators, and there's a certain drift that from now, what's also going to happen is that certain male lecturers, and maybe the majority of them, are going to hold themselves back. Even those who have genuine reasons to assist will now be afraid.
No, they need not be.
No,
Okay.
no,
They need not be.
hold on.
Look,
that is even to suggest that this is going to stop.
Let me make a point.
Yeah.
You see, so what it means is that what I'm telling you is that it is going to stop. This practice will stop. Because people are now going to be extra cautious.
You just said it's as old as corruption. Corruption hasn't stopped.
It began from Adam.
You know, but
Maybe
you mentioned something when we started.
You minimize it.
Our brother Anas did an expose on the judiciary. I'm not able to pass any judgment. But after his expose, are we saying that there's no longer any issue there?
There is.
Of course not.
I don't have any evidence. But are we saying that completely we don't have any?
No.
I don't have any evidence.
Something just refers
But
to
the reason why
some
I'm
of
saying
them.
this is that maybe this discussion and what is going on and the outcome of what will happen in Legon will minimize it.
All right.
Yes.
So,
That's why we are
minimize,
fighting.
but
All
not
right.
stop. Just a minute before Kweku comes in. Look, what is happening is a tipping point. And in every society, if you look at the progress of every society, there comes a time where you need to change, take action on certain things. And you need a tipping point. Rosa Parks will not, integration will not have happened in American universities if Rosa Parks did not start up. I mean, it happens. So for us in Ghana, this is a tipping point.
Okay.
For the Americans in Hollywood, it was a Me Too movement.
Right.
Took many years, but it has to happen.
Right.
That we interrogate the processes.
So he says this is a tipping point, and the UK example I referred to in 2017, all that huge numbers where they said it was in epidemic levels, those who knew the actual situation actually said that was only a tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
And we are talking about a society where there appears to be a lot more transparency. There are rules, and a student knows that a lecturer cannot do anything about my results, really. Some university staff cannot, do anything about. If it's an admission process, he will not do like this lady went seeking admission from that pastor and lecturer. You don't seek admission through a lecturer. In the UK, he just picks his phone, her phone, and then the process is done.
Well, of course, except PhDs, where maybe sometimes you need a supervisor who will then,
Right. In that regard, what can the universities do to ensure that the girls, particularly who are, victimized, who get themselves in this kind of situation, will have an improved environment to be able to function properly without fear?
Well, I know today we are talking about the universities, so perhaps it's legitimate that the focus is there. But honestly, this phenomenon goes beyond the universities.
That's right.
Media houses, our own entities, the churches, workplaces. It's a phenomenon out there. And perhaps we may end up using the university thing as a catalyst in trying to resolve the challenge, which I think would not be entirely wiped out. It's not going to happen.
All right.
We are human beings. There is that element, animal in us. So we are never going to be able to eliminate this thing comprehensively, even with comprehensive sexuality education.
We just discovered that they have codes of discipline. They have policies.
Yes.
What should be done?
I was going to look at the reporting lines. How is it? And I'm going to express some opinion based on ignorance because I really don't know. But what mechanisms have been put in place for victims to report? And how often has that happened? Maybe we need to do a certain research into that. Okay, when the victims report, what is the first reaction of the authorities?
Okay.
Are there efforts to protect the perpetrator and make the victim look like you are a bad person?
Are there efforts to protect the victim too?
Yes. In fact, the emphasis should be there.
Yeah.
Even before you investigate, authenticate, or verify, that victim, quote unquote, at this stage, that reports needs some protection.
Yeah, they said there's a hotline. The University of Ghana, I heard them say that there's a hotline.
How often has it been used?
There's an office.
Okay, because we can't pretend that subculture is not there. It's there. If they check and that thing has not been applied or used often, there's something wrong.
Okay.
Okay, but to be honest with you, let's wait for the committee to begin its work.
Okay.
Let's see how much information BBC will produce
right.
to help all of us come to a judgment.
Okay.
I feel right now I feel the pain.
I want us to take a break in the next 5 minutes, but before then, just a minute from you and perhaps from Newsfile. So when they get to school at the various universities, those who don't have the codes, they must have them. The orientation process, all of this must be part of it.
Excellent.
And so, how else?
So that is it. If only, and of course we can add more education. So what do you call it? I'm aware University of Ghana, but they have Radio Universe. So perhaps they should begin to play different adverts on the committee, okay, to give further education. And they can erect billboards, very big ones, around very vantage points in the universities. Okay.
They have shared flyers. Some say the flyers is not enough.
Exactly, because after a while they get stuck under piles of paper. So that's what I'm saying.
We get to the university, we're giving a handbook. How many of us read it?
Exactly. So that is the point. So that's what we're saying, that they should
until the time when you were interested in becoming an SRC president or somebody, you didn't read the handbook.
Well, we are read the handbook from beginning to end.
And you follow, and you follow suit, right? Yeah. So the point is that let's increase the range of options. So we need a mosaic approach.
Okay.
So if what we've been doing so far has not increased the number of reportage or the number of reported cases, let's think outside the box. As I said, let's do more radio adverts, let's do the billboards, and then as they are increasingly saying, we should publicize the outcome of the committee sittings.
That's the question I was going to ask.
Yes, we should
publicize them.
Yes, except that
but only shaming those who have been found guilty on them.
Exactly.
And not the victims.
Yes. No.
And do these victims, do they tell their parents too, their experience?
Okay. Right.
And what role do
it does appear some do, but their parents who don't want it to report it.
Yes.
Now, what can they do to also, as it were, avoid the situation where there are false accusations? What should happen to those who make false accusations? Like this Andrea's woman who came to give a suggestion.
She made a false allegation.
Oh,
she says that she made her claim in a certain context. But it is agreed that the time she made it
timing,
and the context in which she made it gave the impression that she was saying that the VC has sexually harassed her.
And sections
she has come forward to say the VC did not harass her. Nonetheless, she makes a next serious allegation of misogyny. The VC suggested she was too beautiful to be able, and didn't have the brain, so to speak, to be able to get the position she was and deal with such a big job. Yes.
even that maybe if she has any evidence to that effect and all that.
How do you avoid false allegations, and how do you punish it?
Sam said that is another serious area that somebody can frame you up. Yeah. But you know that as lawyers, when the person just says it, it doesn't mean that that's the end of it. You have to investigate.
Right.
And if the person is unable to substantiate it, then you retract and apologize. Failing which the other, and that's why yesterday a few friends of mine said what the lady sought to do was to escape defamation suits. You know, that was, I mean, by the clarification she came out to do. Because the initial one was like, it was
You're talking about the Pizziconi.
Yes. That's what I'm trying to talk about. So it's very difficult. But we have to also ensure that in order to protect, I mean, it's two ways.
Yeah.
We shouldn't just be looking at the interests of the victim alone, but those who are falsely accused also. You know, you may look at my face, you don't like me, and you say that, oh, this thing is a topical issue, let me go and frame out something and throw it out there and destroy him. And you know that once your name is mentioned, the stigma that will go with it, I mean, people will shy away from you and all that. I wanted to give you, I don't know whether we'll have the opportunity to look at this issue.
No, we won't go to it again. We are taking a break, and I needed just a minute. Yes, do that in 30 seconds.
You see, I was discussing something with my brother. Elsewhere, I've had the opportunity of being a member of a committee to look into sex for grades before. And we've dismissed 2 people.
Great.
Elsewhere.
Teachers?
Yes.
Okay. Interesting.
In a tertiary institution.
I
don't know.
I was a member of
first of all, also says that they've dismissed 3 lecturers.
I see.
First of all, let me say that I have sympathies for the lady who accused the vice chancellor.
Okay.
You don't, in a formal context, sitting, refer to the physical appearance of a woman in making, or a lady in making your point.
We haven't heard the Vice Chancellor on that, whether that is also true or not true.
Well, so that you don't, but whatever be the case, we are just doing this for information purposes, to educate our people.
Okay.
You don't. That's chauvinistic. That's misogyny. That's sexual harassment.
And we know that's also we know that's also widespread, isn't it? We know that's also widespread, isn't it?
It's very widespread.
Where we seem to think that beautiful ladies don't have the brains to get the position. You remember recently the former EC boss was told how she got a job.
Yes,
delicious.
So you don't. It's so bad, and this is because of the male-dominated society in which we are. These are habits that we have cultivated for a very long time.
All right.
And you see, so let me say that we need integrity. We need to get people of integrity. And he said it. We need rules, and the rules must be punitive. We need enforcement of the rules.
Should the rules also include? Should the rules include shaming also those who make false allegations?
Yes, obviously.
All right.
And that counts. I've captured that under transparency.
Okay.
We must do everything in the transparency.
Thank you. On that note, I'd like to just say briefly that the University of Ghana has formally issued a statement dated the 11th of October 2019, and it is information about misrepresentations by Andrea Pizziconi of Africa Integras. And the University of Ghana is now giving the factual basis leading to the situation of, is it a cancellation or abortive contract that she had, and that it had nothing to do with the claims that she sought to make. We take a break here. When we return, we find out how law students who may have been beating a dead horse got beaten.